The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
From the Holy Gospel according to Mark. With the coming of evening, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us cross over to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind him, they took him, just as he was in the boat, and there were other boats with him. Then it began to blow a gale, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that it was almost swamped. But he was in the stern, his head on the cushion, asleep. They woke him and said to him, "Master, do you not care? We are going down." And he woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Quiet now, be calm." And the wind dropped and all was calm again. Then he said to them, "Why are you so frightened? How is it that you have no faith?" They were filled with awe and said to one another, "Who can this be? Even then the wind and the sea obey him." Gospel of the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
I was thinking what to say today. You know, today is the feast of St. Thomas Aquinas, yeah? This Dominican who had a fantastic intellect, yeah? And I chose these readings because these readings are also the readings of the day. That you know, St. Thomas Aquinas, when he came up, yeah, he came up in a particular context. He is noted most of all for the fantastic intellect that he has. Probably he was one of the most intelligent men who ever lived. Yeah? He was able at the same time to dictate to 12 different secretaries. Yeah? He would be in a room and there would be 12 different secretaries, and he would dictate 12 different treatises on God, on theology at the same time. Yeah? This is the kind of mind, this is the kind of man you were talking about. But in the time of Thomas Aquinas, he was persecuted, yeah? He was rejected in many ways, first of all by his parents, because his parents had this idea. They wanted him to become a Benedictine, and they wanted him to become the abbot of the Benedictine abbey that was not so far away from where they lived. And so at a particular moment, yeah, Thomas Aquinas decided to join the Dominican order. And in those days, the Dominican order was something which was just emergent, just coming out. And his parents were opposed, yeah? They were resolutely opposed to this decision of his to become a Dominican, yeah? And so they tried to sway him in everything he did, yeah? And one day, they locked him up for a whole year in a room. And while he was in this room, they had all these women who they sent in the hope that he would be tempted and would fall, and this resolution of his to become a Dominican would somehow begin to waver. And so he experienced persecution, first of all, from his own family. But he also experienced persecution in another quite unique way. Because he was an intellectual and a scholar, at the time of Thomas Aquinas, what happened was that many works were being rediscovered. Yeah? That you know, at a certain point, Christianity had to pass from the Jewish culture to the Greco-Roman world. And in that passage from a Jewish culture in which the Jews knew the history of salvation, knew the Old Testament, knew the scriptures, the church had to find a new language in the end in which to speak about Jesus Christ and about the salvation which he had brought. And God in his providence had already ordained that there should be a way to do this. And the way that God, and this was called the pre-evangelization, yeah? God had already ordained that in the Greco-Roman culture, there should be philosophy, yeah? The Greek philosophies and the philosophers, even today, influence us quite a lot, yeah? And so a big help that was given to the church in the fact that already within the Greek culture, there was a culture based on reason, on the intellect, and so on. And so when the church passed from this Jewish culture to the Greek culture, it found there already a language in which it could speak, yeah? A language in which it could propose to the Greco-Roman world, which is basically us, the gospel of Jesus Christ. In the time of St. Thomas Aquinas, something else was discovered. Through the Muslim scholars, there was once a point at which Islam embraced philosophy, embraced the use of reason, and through the Muslim world, new works from Aristotle were being discovered. And Thomas Aquinas was one of those who welcomed discovery of these new works coming through the Muslim world. They had preserved it amongst themselves, and he began to apply it and he began to use it. But his fellow confreres said, no, this is not acceptable. We cannot accept, we already have our theology coming through Plato, we already have everything sewn up. And one of the great struggles in the end of St. Thomas Aquinas was to reconcile this new learning, the use of reason, to faith. Now, why I'm saying all of this is that we exist in a context today, and the attack very much that we face, because all these readings are speaking about a reality of faith. In the first reading from the letter to the Hebrews, we meet a Jewish community who was converted to Christianity. And this Jewish community was converted to Christianity. In the beginning, they were very enthusiastic. In the beginning, as very often in the spiritual life, God gives you a honeymoon. And in that honeymoon, you have wonderful experiences, maybe a few miracles, all kinds of wonderful consolation. And then inevitably the cross appears. And when the cross appeared for this Jewish community, it appeared in the form of persecution. They found that they could no longer go to the synagogue and no longer were welcome there. They found that all the wonderful liturgies that they used to have in the temple, they couldn't go there anymore. And they begin to experience rejection and persecution. And so in this situation, what happens is they begin to think to themselves, we made a mistake. This decision we made to embrace the Jewish faith, to the Christian faith, was a big mistake, and maybe we need to go back to where we came from. And so the letter to the Hebrews is speaking about the people who run the risk of losing their faith in Jesus Christ, and who run the risk in the end of returning to something which is dead and dying and which is passing away. The Gospel also speaks about this as well, because in the Gospel we have a symbol of the church, And Jesus says to the disciples, let us cross over to the other side. Now the other side, we are not just simply speaking about from one shore of the Lake of Galilee to the other. Jesus is speaking about a journey of faith, of passing from where we are now to the reality of faith, to our heavenly homeland. He's speaking about a journey which little by little means that we look forward to a future, as it speaks about Abraham, Isaac, and so on, of a future, a transcendent future, in which all the blessings spoken about in the Gospel can actually become ours, not only in the next life, but in this life as well. And so Jesus is saying to his disciples, let us pass from the situation you're in now of having no faith, because this is what he says to them in the Gospel, to being a man, a person, a man and woman of faith. And this passage means a passage over these waters. And symbolically, Jesus takes them and puts them inside of a boat. And this boat is the symbol of the church. And now what happens is that as this boat begins to make this passage across this sea, it begins to experience a gale. In other words, like this Jewish community, it begins to experience problems, persecutions, and difficulties. And what happens is that these problems begin to increase. The Sea of Galilee is a sea where you can have storms that arise very quickly. And little by little, as this storm becomes worse, it seems like this boat is going to sink. The church is persecuted in two ways: from outside by people who hate the church, and from inside by those inside the church who somehow compromise with the spirit of the world and somehow who welcome into the boat, welcome into the midst of the church something that comes from outside. And there comes a point where you look at this boat as it's crossing this sea, and you look at this boat without faith and you say, this boat is going to sink. This is what many people say about the church today in Europe. This boat is sinking, and this boat is going to be at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee quite quickly. And this is also true in our personal life. Yeah? In our personal life, there are storms that come along, and maybe some of you this morning are in a storm. Maybe the reason you are here this morning in this day with Mary is you have come along and you want to ask Mary for the gift of the grace in the end of being able to pass successfully through this storm, and at the end of this storm to grow in faith, hope and love. And so this is also an image of our life. In fact, the Sea of Galilee, if you look at it, it has quite a unique geography. It's very shallow in many areas, and if you look at the valleys that lead up to the Sea of Galilee, which is where this happened, there are these valleys, and down these valleys that lead to the Sea of Galilee, you can often get these winds that suddenly blow up. And because the Sea of Galilee is so shallow, it doesn't take very much for the Sea of Galilee to pass from a situation of absolute tranquility to a situation of complete storm, where waves are breaking all over the shore. And it's a good image of our life. Yeah? We can be sailing along nice and quietly, with everything in its right place, with our money in the bank secure, with the children in a good place, with my husband being nice to me. And then suddenly we find ourselves in the midst of this storm where everything seems turned upside down. But what happens? Yeah? The danger here is that Jesus is asleep. Yeah? This is the key to this gospel. That in all of these things, these fishermen have said to Jesus, look, we're going to make this journey across this sea. You're a carpenter, and we are fishermen. We know this sea by the back of our hand. So my dear Jesus, what we want you to do is to go to the back of the boat and just be quiet. Just lie down and chill out, yeah? We are going to handle this situation and this passage. And this is often how we relate to God. We say, God, I am the expert here. I know what life is all about. I know my difficulties. I know what the 21st century is all about. You just sit at the back of the boat and have a nice quiet sleep, and I will deal with this situation. Yeah? Maybe this is why the church struggles so much in this nation and in Europe now, is that we are very confident of our own abilities, and we're very confident that we can handle things with our own intelligence, with our techniques, and all the rest of it. And what happens? Well, Jesus accepts that invitation, and he goes and has a nice siesta at the back of the boat. And the amazing thing is that he continues to sleep. I wouldn't be able to sleep in a boat which is about to sink here. He continues to sleep, and he waits, and he waits, and he waits. And it's only at the last moment, when it seems like this boat is about to sink, yeah, like this boat is about to go beneath the waves, when everything seems to be lost, first of all, that the apostles think, maybe now is the time to turn to this carpenter and ask this carpenter to help us. Yeah? That's like us. Yeah? God is usually at the bottom of the list. Yeah? Okay, we worship him, we pray to him, but at a practical level, we don't wake him up too quickly, because we are quite frightened that if we wake him up, in the end he might ask of us something that we don't want to give. Yeah? And so in the end, when things are absolutely desperate, yeah, they say, let us wake him up, finally. And they don't wake him up asking for his help. They wake him up accusing him. Yeah? They point the finger at him and say, you don't care. Yeah? You don't care. Yeah? Yeah? It's not in faith that they wake him up, but it's in absolute terror. And what happens? Jesus accepts their accusation, and he stands up and he rebukes this wind, yeah, and everything is calm again. Yeah? Everything, this storm is over. Yeah? And then he turns to them and says, how is it you have no faith? He doesn't say they have a little faith. He says, how is it you have no faith? How is it in this situation of the cross, yeah, that your faith evaporated so quickly? He could say this to this Jewish community, and he could say this to us. Yeah? And in the end, they were filled with awe, and they began to question themselves and say, who is this Jesus Christ really? And that's important, because all of us have ideas about God, But maybe our idea about God is not this idea, it's something else. I'm saying all of this because we are in the midst of a huge struggle at the moment. Yeah? The more I look at it, I think, whew, yeah, we're at the end. Yeah? I was reading on my holiday about the foundations of this modern culture. And the foundations go back 200 years with two great events in the history of Europe, the Industrial Revolution and the French Enlightenment. And basically, yeah, this whole struggle is a struggle with the mind, yeah, with the use of human reason. Yeah. What has happened is that man has taken God out of the picture, and man has put his own reason at the center of everything. What they did in the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, they took away the statue of the Virgin Mary, and they put a statue of the goddess of reason, and said, now reason is going to be our God. And this feast of Thomas Aquinas, and these readings and this struggle that we have here, has to be put in this context. We need to pray to St. Thomas Aquinas that he will help us to see that faith and reason are completely united, because reason, yeah, is a gift of God, and faith is also a gift of God. Both of these things come from the same God. And when faith and reason are working together, they work as two brothers, hand in hand, and allow us to grow. And this is important, because in the end, if we are going to speak to our generation, we need to speak in a language that they understand and a language that they can grasp. We also need to understand that in this storm, yeah, Jesus Christ is in the boat with us, because we can run the risk of losing our faith. Like this community of these Hebrews, we can be in this storm, and the great danger in the end is that we lose this reality of faith, which is the most precious thing of all. And this is not theoretical. Yeah? We have some big schools here. Most of the children in the school, they don't come anymore. We have a school up the road, I think there are about 1,200 students there. We don't see any of them. In other words, the reality of faith is something that can be stolen from us. Yeah? By all of these trials, these etc., etc., etc. So let us pray on this day that we venerate the Virgin Mary. And Thomas Aquinas said that he learned more not by studying, but he used to go in front of the Blessed Sacrament, the tabernacle, and he used to put his head on the tabernacle. Yeah? He learned more through prayer than through study. Yeah? Although he was an incredibly intelligent man, he was also an incredibly simple man, and a man who leaned not on his own resources, on his own mind. He used to spend hours in prayer. He used to go up to the tabernacle many times and put his head on the tabernacle, asking Jesus Christ that his intellect would be enlightened by divine wisdom, by divine grace. So let us be happy to be here. My intention in this Mass really is to pray for this parish, to pray for all. We have the board there, all the parish priests, the former parish priests, to pray for the repose of their souls, and to pray that Mary will give us this simplicity of heart that Thomas Aquinas and many of the saints had, and from this simplicity that our faith can be renewed, and we can discover a way in which we can reach out to the many people in this parish who no longer are interested and no longer come here. All of this is possible through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Let us ask her also for all the storms. I imagine in this congregation there are many storms raging in our life today. Maybe your boat is about to sink. Yeah? Maybe you're looking at your life and you say, ooh, in a few minutes this whole boat is going to go down. Let us ask Mary with her faith to strengthen our own little faith, to intercede for us that we might increase in faith, hope and love. This is my desire, my intention here, and I pray for you, you pray for me today.